neighbors. Everybody needs good neighbors.
Yeah, this is definitely not that. In fact, this is fucking horrible. But indeed, it does involve neighbours and how something small that is nothing to someone can be something to someone else. And what do I mean by that? Well, that is what I'll mean by this in a long story short. This long story short takes place in a place called Norton Fitzwarren, that's Somerset, and that is in a place where they play rugby quite well actually, and that's called England. And in this place in England live neighbours, Jennifer and Stephen Chappell, with their two little boys, and they live next door to these neighbours called Kaylee and Colin Reeves. Now, as it goes, as it usually does, these guys were mates as Colin and Kaylee had two little girls, so white picket fences and all that other shit. Anyway, neighbours, mates next door, as it should be. But then one day, that something happened, and that was a nothing. That something was that Stephen had dinged his car into his neighbour's car. And as you do as a mate next door, Stephen got the damage fixed immediately. So that something that was nothing to the Chappells wasn't a nothing to the Reeves. And from that day forth, the neighbours weren't that neighbourly anymore. So what happened was there became this issue over a car park outside the houses on the street. And for some reason, inside Colin's head, this parking spot became his. So whenever the Reeves, mainly Jennifer, would park their car there, this would happen.
You can't reverse in here when the car's here all the time. That's all right, you've got one parking space.
And so the problem of this nothing grew, and it grew inside Colin's head to the point where he became transfixed with this parking spot, that he then placed up cameras filming the car park, and whenever Jennifer would come home, this would happen.
She's the one who started it, so off.
What's that, you fat
God.
So you can see that Colin here isn't quite the full quid, as they say in Aotearoa. Let me know if they say that in your country, actually, or let me know a saying that they say in your country when describing someone who is a loose cannon, and I'll use some of these sayings in some episodes coming up. Leave me your first name and country, and I'll place it in if I do. Anyways, back to this quid that's not quite full. You see, when you have a problem with someone and you can't seem to work out the differences out, a word of advice is if you're planning on going into battle, you must always take into account the makeup of your opponent and whether that makeup of your opponent is not the full quid. Because you see, that's a danger. And in this case, danger Will Robinson, because you see Colin here is an ex-soldier boy, and though he didn't see a lot of action, he did see a lot of death. And what makes a soldier boy here a little bit more tricky is when you have a beef with them, well, that would be that they have been taught on how to be efficient when it comes to one thing: murdering, or as we call it, war and warring. And when you have that as a makeup and throw in not a full quid, then at some stage the fan will have some shit in it. And that fan with that shit in it, well, that happened on November 21st, 2021. On that night, our loose cannon here became a DC. And how did that happen? Well, a straw that weighs a ton and a camel with a bad back came along, and that camel was that DC here, after getting back from a war memorial, was not feeling the full quid and went to his wife and told her how he felt. And as a supporting wife, she said, I think we should split up for a while. And so the camel went snap and did a shit, and it just happened to be above a fan. And DC here did what DCs do, and he grabbed a commando knife, crept next door to his neighbours, and ruined the lives of two little boys. And then he called the police.
I was stabbed.
Right, when's
Neighbour's
that?
husband and the mother.
Whereabouts have you been stabbed?
No, not me, the neighbours.
The neighbour's been stabbed by who?
By me.
By you?
Yes.
Right, okay. How bad are the injuries?
They've both been stabbed.
Right,
times.
several times. All right, stay on the line for me, okay?
So the coppers, well, they go get him, right?
Right.
With your hand.
Put your hands up.
Not me, mate. Him.
You?
Go in the house. Then.
Right, put your hands up. Right. Hold still. Hold still. Listen, you're under arrest at the minute on the attempted murder of 2 people inside the address next door. Do you understand? Okay. Let's walk over here a minute, out the way. Can you guys just... Alright, that's fine. We'll sort it.
What's your first name? Colin.
And it's about here that DC starts thinking about how he's going to get out of this one and starts his acting in the interview.
Right. Confused. Don't understand why I'm here. Because it's doing my job. It's an operation.
Firstly, I just need to ask you, when you were arrested and brought into custody, when you were being assessed in the custody unit here, you said to the I think it was the custody nurse, I shouldn't have done it, I've ruined their lives and mine. Can I just confirm, did you say that?
No comment.
And what did you mean by that?
No comment.
Okay, Colin, in as much detail as possible, tell me what happened yesterday in Dragon Rise that led to the deaths of Jennifer and Stephen Chappell. Explain to me exactly what happened inside Dragon Rise. Did you kill Jennifer and Stephen?
No comment.
How were you involved in their deaths?
No comment.
Because DC here, as most of them do, pleads not guilty and goes for the old insanity defence, but except in England it's called diminished responsibility. And his play is that when he went to the war memorial that evening, the flashing lights and the people set him off and caused a flashback, and he thought he was back in Nam flying Hueys and bombing the shit out of people, and therefore it's not his fault that he came home, had an argument with his wife, and then crept next door and brutally murdered his innocent neighbours. It's the Afghans' faults. All their camels had bad backs, and just like those camels, his defence hit the fan. And the psycho neighbour, DC, got 37 years in the pen, and 2 little kids became orphans. And like I said at the start, this is not that. Who's up next on the block? Whose neck is next to chop? Well, that would be this prick. And who is he? Well, his name is Mark Terry. He's from England, and I shall use this DC and what he did and who he did it to, so as to teach a lesson to all good young men out there that watch this episode and how not to follow false mana. This is a lesson in mugging. And who did he mug? Well, that would be these guys. You see, this is a brief lesson in being played, or aka mugged. Now, let me show you how this mugging went down. In August of 2013, Genius here didn't like this guy, and his name's Gary Pocock. He's a simple man and a good man, as all our DC Vics seem to be. And what did he do to DC? Well, he did nothing but be his friend and trust him. And when you do that to someone that doesn't have mana, it can become very bad. And bad it did, because just one day, and for no apparent reason whatsoever, DC here decided that he wanted to kill Gary, so he set a plan in motion to take a life, and as he's a DC, he also would ruin some other lives, and he did that by way of mugging, as we call it here at the channel and inside the DC universe. And what is this mugging? Well, that is when someone manipulates another to do something under a banner of either love or righteousness, friendship, or a huge one is mana. And to do that, all you need to do is find a mug and fill it up with one or all of these. And to do that, all Genius here has to do is tell his little groupies, or as we call them here, mugs. You see, these mugs thought that this guy's real cool because he's old and looks like shit. That's all you need, apparently, to have mugs hanging around you. So Genius here hatches a plan to use the mugs to kill the Vic. And he does that by using the one thing that causes humans to be sick and to say to his mugs that the Vic is a pedo. And of course, with mugs, they don't need to have any evidence because they don't think that they're being mugged. And that, his face, is the face that you can trust. So Genius puts his plan into play and invites our Vic out for some beers and a cruise. And as they're all getting out and getting drunk, Genius here then says, hey, let's get under the beach and I'll show you my very small penis. And everyone was like, yeah, cool, I heard it was freaky small. So they all head down to the beach to look at his dick. And when they get there, instead of a dick, they all had baseball bats. And Genius, his small dick, and his mugs brutally murdered Gary. Now, that makes this prick a real worthless, mannerless, gutless prick, and his mugs, well, the name says it all. But what lifts this prick into the level of the DC is that he was so confident that his J for Genius plan was foolproof, that him and his mugs did this.
It hasn't sunk in properly yet. Something like this it just knocked everybody for six. We none of us can actually understand the reason behind it.
Rather justice be served, and whoever it is to be locked up for the rest of their life, because nobody should have that done to them. Nobody in the world.
Really pathetic people. Look, the lesson from this long story short would be this. When someone says something about someone, if that something someone says invokes a reaction of rage, disgust, or the negative, and if that person looks like this, then remember this lesson and be a vessel and not a mug. And finally, if you ever blindly follow a DC and end up murdering an innocent person, and when it goes to court, when you give evidence that you're not this type of person and that you felt peer pressure and thought that you'd be killed if you didn't take part, remember this. Don't pump your fist in the air celebrating the killing while on video, as us humans may have a problem believing you're not a DC. Hi-ho, hi-ho, and who is next to go? Let's take a look at one of those worthless muppets who bash their partners, the weak ones. But this weak one isn't a pathetic little boy. This one's a girlie that bashes her man. This is her here. Her name's Johanna Andre, and what makes her get a slice on my channel? Well, that's because she's a genius. And what makes her a genius? Well, that would be many things really, but the ones I'll concentrate here are how she pulled off, or tried to pull off, killing her partner. And that would be this guy, our Vic, and his name is Manuel Garcia. Now, what happened was that old DC here's nutted up once again and attacked Manuel, but this time she's gone too far, and she stabbed him hard and deep into his chest and hit that thing that she doesn't have called a heart. And now she's come up with her story number one, and that would be one of those genius moments as she says that Manuel was the one who was the bad guy, that he was the one that was pathetic and used to beat her up, and this time he got so angry with her that he got so enraged that instead of beating her up, he stabbed himself.
Tell us, in your own words, what happened that night.
We decided to go to her sister's boyfriend's house So, and I told him, go home, what are you doing? And I told him, I said, you know what, I'm leaving, and I left you. And he went, he got the knife from the dishwasher. Oh, do you want me to show you what he did? Yeah, sure. And he leave me again. And then like, and he just like stabbed himself. How did you do that? I was grabbing fucking. I told him, what the did you do?
Now, here's the crazy thing, and that would be that the majority of the cops on this investigation actually believed that that is what happened. What DC said, story 1, was true. And they probably did that. They probably believed it partway just due to this picture and how it portrays Manuel. Because it's not that flattering. Biasness can play a heavy part in the way in which law enforcement looks at you. But then again, that isn't really such a surprise. There were real cops there, smart ones. There was some, not many, but a few. And those cops thought that she was full of it, and that it would make up the end of her shit. And what the detective did was to look back at how DC here describes how Manuel had done himself. He watches DC and see how she holds the knife and the angles of which she makes in showing and describing how he stabbed himself. And when he watched enough, he then got the autopsy and asked the nerd in the white cloak, is this possible? And the nerd said something along the lines of, well, yes it is, but you would just need 2 things. And the cop said, what? And the nerd said, well, first, he would need to have another arm, and the second thing is that that other arm would have to be growing out the backside of his fucking head. So now the copper knows he's got a murder, and now he also knows that he has to prove it, and he knows that any half-assed lawyer could get his client off easy. So the copper knows if he arrests her now under suspicion that she's going to lawyer up, they will have to look elsewhere, and elsewhere isn't much there at all. So copper here thinks, if I can get her to take a polygraph, and if she fails, which he hopes and knows she will, that for some that would be enough, because a whole lot of people believe in that voodoo, and that includes the people that actually take them. So the copper doesn't arrest yet, goes to work on getting her convinced that she should want to take a polygraph on her own accord. And though normally, with normal people, that task would be quite difficult, one must remember that this chick's a DC. And just like planting a truffle tree, it ain't that hard at all.
Okay, one more time. How did he stab himself?
He went like
Go
that.
Go through the whole motion.
I don't know. It was like fast. I know.
And now she starts slipping.
It was just all too fast. It was really fast about everything.
What a genius. He hasn't even thought up a proper story. J for genius.
This is very important, okay? I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah.
The family thinks that you killed him.
How?
Would you be willing to take a polygraph, a lie detector test?
It's not going to do anything for them.
You don't think so? To show
no.
Let us handle
because I've already dealt with this.
Now listen carefully, because this copper is seeking this information.
I've dealt with this family for so many years, and I already know that the way I'm getting a lot of death threats right now.
Was his name
I'm getting threatened with my life.
Oh, you see, DC's as dumb as mud. And this copper, well, he's pretty smart. Because you see, this copper hears how DC is talking about Manuel's far now. He now knows what he has to say to get DC to take the polygraph, because he's worked out the kind of chick that she is, because it's not about the simple rationale about taking the polygraph and that would clear her as a suspect, because she doesn't give a shit about him saying that to the far now. No, it's what the copper says next. That's why she takes the polygraph. She doesn't take the polygraph because it would clear her name. She takes the polygraph because what he says and how he says it to the far now would hurt them even more, because this cop has worked out exactly the type of person that DC is.
But Don't you think it'd be nice to have your test proof? And I tell them, look, you guys need to get off this chick's back. Your son was jacked up on coke and he killed himself.
Ooh, that's a bingo.
Regarding whether or not you placed a knife inside of your boyfriend's chest, do you intend to answer each question truthfully about that?
Yes.
During the first 18 years of your life, do you remember hurting someone who loved and trusted you?
No.
Did you place the knife in Manny's chest?
So now that the copper has the poly, he can now use that voodoo against her. And you see, now he starts to use those read techniques. These ones I call the hook, line and sinker. They're pretty recognisable, unless of course you're a DC, because then they have no idea that instead of walking out of court, they are talking themselves into prison. J for genius.
Have you been honest with me?
Yes.
Here we go.
Okay, you haven't been honest with me because you're lying on this examination.
That's the hook. And here comes those lies.
Every time I ask you a question about did you place the knife in Manny's chest, you are reacting.
And she's falling for every one of them.
Which means you are guilty.
Look at genius here, thinking it over. And you see the copper knows that she hasn't got a story, so he's going to offer her one.
Did you do this accidentally?
And that, ladies and gentlemen, and all of those in between, that is what we call the sinker.
Tell me the truth. Was it accidental?
Yes.
You guys were fighting and you stabbed him?
Yes.
J for genius.
I stopped him.
Which way though? How did you stab him?
I stopped him because he was coming at me. We were fighting.
And now we get story number 2.
Well, why didn't you tell us that night?
Because I didn't want him to be charged with murder.
I'll say it again, but that is J for genius.
I got fed up with it. I didn't mean to kill him.
But she did, as pretty much all abusers say and think so, that they have bashed their partner before and they always recover. In their universe, it's just not fair that they get in trouble when it's obviously their partner's fault. And DC, well, she ends up getting snapped for 2nd degree and really just gets a slap on the wrist with 20 years, having to serve half that, just a little bit of time in the big house. Now, as you know me, I fucking hate the bad guy, especially those bad guys that are the weaker sex. And what do I mean by that? Well, the weaker sex in our universe are those feeble, pathetic, mindless people that abuse their partner, be it physical or mental. In that relationship of two, it is the wahine that is labelled the weaker sex, but that label is towards physical strength. And that is not this weakness. This weakness has nothing to do with strength on the outside. This weakness is way more important than that strength. This weakness is of the strength of the inside, the mana, that strength from within. Anyone that's in a relationship, especially one that's loving, and anyone in that kind of relationship puts their hands on the other, then that person is the weaker sex within that relationship, be it if they're a boy or a girl. Inside their relationship, inside our universe, they are the weaker sex. And a word of advice and hope from me and all the members of my team and of this channel, for those people that are being bashed or abused right now and they see this episode, you need to leave and then start living. And if you're in danger and you want to leave, you need to get hold of and learn about escape planning and then put that into action. There are many agencies out there willing and wanting to assist you in getting away and keeping away from those worthless, mindless, tantrum-throwing losers who can't control their little boy tempers and put their hands on you. You are worth 1,000 times more than any one of them. Now, I grabbed one of those plans of action from a mate called Phil. He's a doctor, so he must know what he's talking about. Anyways, I'll leave a link in the description. Even if it's just that you take a look when the worthless, gutless, manless prick isn't around. And remember, kia kaha. And lastly, and this goes for all of them, that these manless people that hurt their partners, no matter how much they say sorry, and that they will change and please take me back. Remember this, manless people should never be given a chance, because manless people will never change. And my hope with all of that is that they prove me wrong. Stay safe, everyone. And for those people that watch this episode and are in that type of relationship and aren't the weakest sex, remember, 1,000 times any one of them. 1,000 times. Right. Now with that said, I will see all of you guys in the next episode. Ka kite.